Or this is how we make the sausage.
You somehow managed to leave that out of this interview, but I love it.
It was intentional.
Oh, wow.
You want the American dream. You want the life, the liberty, the happiness. But until you get there, until you achieve your goals and make your dreams come true, you know what you have. You have the journey, the hustle, the climb. I'm Kelsey Humphreys, and this is The Pursuit, where I interview the best of the best in person on their home turf about how they got started, how they got to where they are today, and what you can learn from them about success. Prepare to be inspired, equipped, motivated, encouraged, and have a lot of fun.
5, 4, Kelsey, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you for joining me for Season 2 of The Pursuit. Our first episode is with Michael Hyatt, which was so surreal because I've read his book and I've purchased some of his books and programs that he has about publishing. And so to sit down with him was just crazy. And it was also crazy because I had not too long ago reached out to him for a blurb for my book and, was rejected because he gets tons of those. And so I thought it'll be forever before I can get Michael Hyatt on my show. But like you know, this is a traveling talk show. So for this episode, I packed myself and my family in my car. I was actually going to Nashville to speak at the second annual Launch Out conference. I was a speaker and also an MC there, and it was amazing. I get to stay with my sister whenever I shoot in Nashville, which is awesome, but she lives out in the boonies, and it was raining that day, and we left my iPad back at the house, and I was worried. I mean, out there you could get stuck behind a tractor and be 30 minutes late to this interview. So I was really nervous, but everything turned out fine. And the fact that I forgot my iPad actually turned out to be awesome, but you'll have to watch the bonus footage to figure out what I mean about that. I think it's a more fun, relaxed side of Michael Hyatt than you're used to seeing, which is why I love doing these interviews in person, because I can get these people to crack up and let loose. So I think you'll really enjoy this week's episode with Michael Hyatt. Michael Hyatt is the author of the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today bestseller platform, Get Noticed in a Noisy World. He is also the former chairman and CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishers and has spent 30 years working in nearly every facet of book publishing. Most recently, Forbes magazine named him one of the top 10 online marketing experts to follow and one of the top 50 social media influencers. It's no wonder, because his blog, michaelhyatt.com, is ranked by Google in the top 0.5% of all blogs, with almost 500,000 unique visitors a month. His podcast, This Is Your Life, is consistently in the top 10 in the business category on iTunes and downloaded by more than 350,000 people a month. He has more than 220,000 followers on Twitter, and he is also the president and founder of Platform University, an online membership community designed to give people the inspiration, coaching, and resources they need to get noticed in this noisy world. While Michael loves his work, it is not the most important thing in his life. That position belongs to his family. He has been married to his wife, Gail, for 37 years. They have 5 daughters, 4 sons-in-law, and 8 grandchildren, and they live just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you so much for letting us join you today. We are here in your brand new studio outside your home. This is so cool. I'm very jealous that you have a dedicated space for this. It's so awesome.
Well, it's awesome to be on with you. And you're one of the first to use this studio, so
I feel special.
we're glad you could break it in.
Well, this is an honor. I read your book, and I actually, before I self-published, I downloaded some of your, you have multiple products about books, and so it's just surreal for me to get to sit with you today. But I think as many fans as you have, a lot of them have only found you in the last 1 to 2 years, even though I've been following you forever. So I'd love it if you could go back and walk us through kind of your story leading up to before you became CEO at Thomas Nelson.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've worked in the book publishing industry my entire career. Started when I was in college, kept going after that, worked in every aspect of book publishing. So marketing, editorial, management, started my own company. I was a literary agent for a number of years, but I went back to Thomas Nelson in 1998. I'd been there shortly, about a decade before, and started my own company out of that. But I came back to Thomas Nelson in 1998. Eventually worked my way into senior management and eventually became the CEO of the company.
I think a lot of people who are hustling towards success want to become a C-level executive. I know we talk a lot about small business and business owners, but I think, working your way to CEO is also something worth talking about. So what do you think were some of the keys of success that got you to CEO?
Yeah, I think one thing happened in particular when I came back to Thomas Nelson. They gave me charge of one division out of 14 that was dead last in every metric. So it had the lowest return on assets, the lowest growth rate. I mean, everything was screwed up. And so that was a great position to be in, because all I had to do is put a little intention into it, a little focus, rally the team. And in 18 months, we went from number 14 to number 1. So that got the attention of the senior management of the company at the time. And so they gave me more stuff to manage. And thankfully, I was able to manage that well. And I think if there was one key that I had, I've just been super responsive. So whether I get an email or a phone call, I get right back to people. And in this world where so many people take forever, their inboxes are overrun, you can really stand out by being responsive. And people think that you're competent because you're responsive. Not always the case. But people assume that.
Now, you talked in one of your interviews about when you first got to your CEO position, you were like, how long is it going to take before everyone finds out I don't know what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Which we have all been there so many times. So how do you balance being authentic and feeling like, you have no idea what you're doing?
Yeah, I think part of it is you just got to recognize the fact that fear is natural. Whenever you get outside of your comfort zone, you're going to feel fear. And I've just learned to reframe that so that is kind of a positive indicator that I'm on the right path. Because I want to grow as an individual. I want to continue to realize my potential, to expand my abilities and my skill. And that takes trying new things. It takes getting outside of my comfort zone, not doing the same old thing over and over again.
Right.
But I didn't always understand that. So that when I was stepped into those fearful situations where I felt like I was playing over my head or out of my league, it was scary. And that's exactly when your best traits come out. It either makes you or breaks you.
Yeah. Now, you start blogging while you're CEO, and then, your blog just starts to explode, and eventually you realize, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you realized, like, hey, at this point, I could just shift and do this full time.
Yeah. I remember in 2009, a web developer came to me. He'd worked on a redesign of my site. I'm still the CEO of Thomas Nelson at this point. And he says, you realize you could monetize this platform? And I said, what? And he said, you could monetize it. Make money from it. And I said, really? I said, how would that work? And so he started talking to me about advertising, and I thought, okay, that's kind of cool. I got to try that. And so, I don't know, I was making about $3,000 a month from advertising revenue, which, for some people that'd be a lot of money. For me, it was interesting, you know, and I thought that's kind of cool. And I thought, I wonder what else I could do. So by the time I stepped out of Thomas Nelson, I'd really come to a fork in the road. And I realized that the blog had become more and more demanding. And that if I was really going to realize my potential as a creative, I was going to have to step into that. So I had a lot of things in place, not everything in place, but a lot of things in place to step out. And I felt the confidence that it was the right time.
Now, this is going to be no surprise to you, but the most questions I got for you from people was, well, if he wasn't CEO of a publisher at the time with his blog, how would he have done it? Which I think is a little bit of an unfair question, you guys. So I want to give you something very specific. So if back at the time where you had, let's say you're a literary agent, you're still an employee, but you wanted to, go out as your own literary agent later on as a solopreneur, and you had 0 Twitter followers and 0 blog, how would you start today?
Can I address that question?
Yes, go back.
Because I get that a lot.
I bet you do. It was the most asked one.
And honestly, I feel like it was a handicap. Because how many CEO blogs do you read?
Yeah, none.
Because typically, CEOs, it's all about corporate speak. They're spinning, they're not really giving you any authentic information. And so I felt like people were prejudiced against me, thinking that it was just a PR thing or, they really wouldn't give me the time of day. So I felt like I had to overcome that. And it was difficult. Yeah. But so people use all kinds of excuses for why they don't succeed, right?
Right.
If I was only that guy, if I only had that education, if I only had their good looks, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you have to use whatever assets you have. And the most important thing in blogging, the most important thing to grow an audience, is write compelling content. You got to write stuff, create content that people actually want to tune into. If you don't do that, I don't care what your title is. I don't care how beautiful you are. You'll eventually be found out. People know that there's just nothing there.
All right, so let's rewind a little bit and, kind of when you left your as CEO and then went out on your own, there's some overlap that I think is interesting. And one question we had from Tyson Ruhr was he wanted to know about hiring and a team. And so obviously, at Thomas Nelson, you had to find talent and choose to promote people. So what did you learn from that experience and pull over into then suddenly working for yourself and then eventually trying to find people to help you?
Yeah, I think it was tough initially because I had 2 full-time assistants at Thomas Nelson. I had 600 employees. I had to think of the idea and then people would go execute it. It was awesome. But now all of a sudden as a solopreneur, I'm doing everything, including finding the FedEx box, which I don't even know how to put together a FedEx package or where it goes. Any of that. It was all brand new to me. So I'm trying to do that myself, and I'm finding myself buried in administrative stuff. Whether it was trying to do the accounting and the invoicing, trying to write a blog, book my own speaking, all that stuff. What I didn't realize, and this is something that's just developed in the last few years, is sort of the magic of virtual assistants. Because I'm thinking to myself, I really don't want to take on a full-time employee.
Right.
I mean, first of all, the burden of the payroll, and I'm still a little uncertain about whether this is going to work.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'm going to see about this virtual assistant thing. So I talked to a guy at EA Help, a friend of mine, Brian Miles, and I said, okay, what could you do for me? And we had a great conversation. He said, look, you could hire somebody for 5 hours a week. I said, what? He said, yeah, 5 hours a week. He said, I'm talking about a top-notch executive assistant that has corporate experience, that just wants the flexibility of staying at home, but we'll assign somebody to you. Obviously, you pay for it, but it'll be 5 hours a week. And if you grow from there, you could do 10 hours a week or whatever. And so now I have 2 assistants, but they're virtual assistants. Now, these are employees today, but none of them nobody that works for me except about 3 people live in Nashville, Tennessee, where I live.
Yeah, I think I worked with 4 or 5 of your assistants for this interview. Yeah, they're awesome. They're great. You've got great people.
Thank you.
Working for you. So with that, let's talk about what is your average day? What do you spend your time doing once you were able to get rid of all those other things?
Yeah, well, I figured out, as it turns out, I'm only good at a few things.
I doubt that.
And there's a lot of things I could do, but they pay me too much to do those things. You know what I'm saying? And so I really focus on the things that I do the best, which is content creation. Okay. So that's almost exclusively what I work on. I'm either working on a blog post, shooting video like this, my podcast, which we batch now and shoot 13 episodes in 2 days.
Oh, wow.
Once a quarter. Every day is a little bit different. I only do meetings, generally speaking, I do internal meetings on Monday, and I do external meetings on Friday. And I've just found for me that if I batch stuff, I'm way more efficient. So if I've got my head into creating and I'm writing, then if I have to have a meeting in the middle of that, it takes me hours sometimes to regain my focus.
Yeah, that's true.
So I really stay where we schedule the calendar where those specific times are dedicated to specific kinds of activities, but they're almost all creative.
Awesome. Now, with all of that content that you're creating, one question we had from Tammy was, as your platform has grown, where like I'm writing this and 500,000 people are going to read it, has that been a challenge for you to stay authentic and within your voice?
Yeah, I think it has. Unfortunately, sometimes I'm naive about this. So I'll write not really realizing the scope of it and sometimes offend people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I don't realize sometimes that my audience is international, for example.
Right.
Or that people of different faiths read it or whatever. And so I have to be really conscious, and I'm trying to do this, be more and more conscious that I'm writing for a global audience and I'm not just sitting here chatting with you.
Right.
Now, having said that though, I think you really can suck the life and the color out of somebody's voice. One time I was at this big leadership conference and I had been hired not only to speak but to interview a couple of Fortune 500 executives on stage so people could get to know them. And so I won't tell you who it was or what company they represented, but they sent me a series of authorized questions that I could ask. And they told me, they said, you cannot ask anything other than this question.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you what, the answers to the questions were politically correct, perfectly framed, totally boring.
Boring, I know.
Everybody's going to sleep. So then I made the mistake of asking this guy a question, because I interview like you do, and I'm just kind of going with the conversation. So I said, well, tell me about the most important leadership book you've read this last year.
And he hadn't read one.
And I mean, his eyes glazed over, and he hem-hawed around, and he didn't really have anything to say at all.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate the guts of you doing that, though. That's awesome.
Yeah, I didn't get in trouble. I mean, what could they do?
Right, you're up there on stage. Too late now. Now, you mentioned speaking, and this is just me totally selfish asking this question that I want to hear the answer to. But what is your advice for speakers just getting started? And then what is your advice to transition into keynoting?
Well, I think the most important thing you can do if you want to build a speaking career, first and foremost, is create a speaking page on your blog. Mm-hmm. So you've got to let people know that you're in business, that you're a professional speaker. And I have a very specific format for doing that, a couple chapters in my book platform, Get Noticed in a Noisy World, for how to set up a speaking page. And there's a particular psychology to do that. But once I did that, my bookings tripled because people knew I was in business to do that. And I answered the kind of questions that event planners ask. Yeah. You know, like, what are the topics that you speak on? What do other people say about your speaking? So getting endorsements is very important. Putting together a demo reel is critically important. Now, the problem is at the beginning you don't have that, right? So initially I would go speak for free if they would video it and give me the video so that I could put that as a part of my demo reel. Because the number one question an event planner has is, can you hold your own in front of a crowd? Are you interesting or boring? You know, can you speak? Right. And so nothing says that like a video. So then over time, you know, we just got better at that and have a real snazzy one now, but it took a while. But the speaking page is the first thing. Okay. Now to your second question, how do you transition from doing breakouts to keynoting? You got to kill it in your breakouts. Well, first of all the event planners, it's a very small world. They all talk to each other, and they're always looking for new talent. So if you really perform in the assignment that you've been given, you'll eventually be given a keynote opportunity. So that's what I think is key. So approach it like you're given a keynote. That's how I do breakouts.
So now you're speaking less and you're doing Platform University and all of your content creation. And we had a couple questions. Rick Tooley wanted to know if this really is your dream that you're living now. And then Lucretia Braxton, she asked about if this was what you expected it to be. And so I just wonder with...
Two good questions.
Yeah, are you living the dream?
Absolutely.
Oh, well, that's awesome.
I am totally living the dream, and it's totally not what I expected.
What's been the most unexpected part?
I think the opportunity to create my life. You know, the freedom. Because you think... before I was a CEO, I thought, man, if I could just get to the top of the pyramid, and if I can be the CEO, I'm going to have extraordinary freedom. I never had so many constraints on me, ever. This last Sunday, my wife and I came back from a month-long sabbatical. The business ran, the business prospered. I could never do that in a corporate job. Yeah. And so, you know, it's taken 3 years to get here, but I've been pretty shocked at the growth, how fast it's happened.
Now, I heard in another interview, because you mentioned bosses, which made me think of this, that if you could go back to your younger self, you would tell yourself to hire a coach sooner. And so nowadays, though, if someone is in the small business entrepreneurial world and they were to just look up coach, everyone is a coach. Right. So what's your recommendation on finding a good coach? How did you find yours?
Well, I'll tell you what I did. I was, the first one I ever had, I was sitting in a John Maxwell presentation. And John Maxwell mentioned that he had worked with a company called Building Champions, and that their CEO, Daniel Harkavy, was this awesome guy, and he talked about him. And I thought, well, if John thinks he's great, I'm going to see what I can do. I think finding a reputable firm, I wouldn't go to some, 2x4 coach that just...
I can see you being very careful with
yeah,
how
I'm trying
you're
to
saying
be. I'm trying not to offend anybody. But a lot of people that are unemployed start calling themselves a coach, in the hopes that they can get a little freelance work and maybe coach somebody. Right. I want to hire somebody that's got a life that I'd like to emulate.
And so flipping the script a little bit on that, now that you're a mentor to a lot of people, what do you look for in a mentee?
I look for somebody that's willing to follow through, to own their life, take responsibility for it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I also, of course, I have something called the Inner Circle, which is my membership mastermind thing, but I charge people a lot of money to be in that group. Now, I got to tell you a secret. This is really interesting. So for 3 years, I did a mentoring group for free. I had like 80 guys apply. I picked 10, and I did it for free for 3 years. It wasn't that great of an experience. You know why? Because people weren't invested.
Right. Yeah.
And my experience is that people don't pay attention unless they pay. So now I've got these guys, these 10 guys in this Inner Circle group who paid a lot of money to be there. I'm going to tell you, at our breaks at the mastermind meetings, we just had one yesterday, they're on the phone executing on what we decided the previous session.
Yeah.
Because they're paying money, they're invested.
Right.
So I'm looking for somebody that's all in.
Yeah, that's good. You
make
have
sense?
so many great one-liners. I just can't wait to make social media images out of them and everything. This is great. Okay, so going back to still on the topic of coaches, we had Ryan write in a question about who would you say, now maybe other than the coach you just mentioned, has been has made a big impact on your life?
Yeah, I would say one of my still best friends, but former business partner, Robert Wolgamuth.
Okay.
And we were business partners. I worked for him for a number of years in the publishing world, but just a quick story, and I've told this elsewhere, so stop me if you've heard this. But I was working for him at a little company in Waco, Texas called Word Publishing. And it was my first job in publishing. He hired me at $27,000 a year. And I really told him I needed $30,000. And he said, well, you don't really have any experience. He said, but I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll review this after 90 days. And if you've done a great job, then I'll give you the raise. I said, great. So I worked my tail off, worked hard. I did pretty good work. And he was impressed. But he called me up after 90 days and he said, look, he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but I know I promised you a raise. You've worked, you've earned it. But he said, here's the deal. We're in a hiring freeze and a salary freeze. I can't give you that increase that I promised. So, man, I was crestfallen. You know, I'd really expected this. I was disappointed. I got that his hands were tied. There was nothing he could do.
Right.
So I went back to my office. Next day he calls me up and he says, I want you to come into my office. And I came up. And he said, have a seat. And he had an envelope in his hand. And he said, look, he said, I'm about to do something and you can't say no. So he said, my wife and I talked about this last night. But he said, and here's a check for $3,000. And we're going to pay this out of our own pocket because I'm a man of my word. I told you that I would do this, not the company. And I learned for the first time what integrity in business looks like, which is making your actions line up with your words.
Wow.
And that lesson has served me in so many ways, in so many contexts, of making the decision to follow through and do something you said you were going to do, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's expensive, even when you wished you hadn't made that commitment. But integrity compels me to do it anyway.
Wow, that is a cool story. I had not heard that. So now you as a leader, leading people, one thing that's interesting is I know that your daughter works for you.
Yep.
And then...
Two of them, actually.
2 daughters,
Yep.
Okay. And you talk a lot about family-life balance. Have you had any issues and how did you work through it, working together as family?
You know, that's actually been surprisingly easy. Now, I will tell you the one thing where it was difficult. You know, I used to leave for the office at 7 in the morning, and Gail wouldn't see me again till usually 6 or 7 o'clock that night because I had to commute to get to the office. Now, all of a sudden, I'm in her home, in her space, trying to run my business.
Yeah.
Now, I'm trying to create, so I kind of need her and the grandkids and everybody else to kind of hold it down so I can create. And, of course, if the grandkids come over, you know, I want to get up and go see them and all that. So there was some tension. You know, who owns this space? And so I finally figured out that she does.
I could have told you that.
Everything got really good after that.
Yeah.
But now this is my office, but it's out of her space.
Right. Yes,
Yeah.
which is key. I want to know, looking back over the entire journey, what has been the best part and what has been the worst part? Let's maybe start leaving Thomas Nelson. That
Okay.
might be an easier way to answer
Okay, so as my life as an entrepreneur.
that. Yes, best and worst.
Yeah, I think the best part has been the freedom I was talking about. I think the toughest thing is creating just the infrastructure to run the whole thing because we started from scratch and we've doubled every year since we've started. And so trying to keep the infrastructure up with everything else, all the hiring decisions, all of that's challenging. You know, and it's not the part I enjoy the most.
Right.
I love creating,
Yeah.
but we're slowly getting into place people that can do that.
Okay, so if you were to sit down with someone at the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey, and besides telling them to start, because I've heard you say that a lot, like just get started.
Yep.
So besides that, what's the number one piece of advice you'd give them?
Get comfortable with fear.
That's good.
Yeah, so whenever you're starting to feel fear, uncertainty, and doubt, reframe that as positive indicators that you're moving outside of your comfort zone. And as an entrepreneur, it's essential. Because if you stay where you're comfortable, you'll never grow. If you get comfortable with being uncomfortable and comfortable with fear, and realizing that courage and fear are two different things. You know, courage, and this isn't original with me, but courage is the willingness to act in spite of your fear.
Right.
Right? So when I get up to do a keynote speech, I'm always afraid. You know, if you came up and shook hands with me before I get a keynote speech, my hands are cold, they're sweaty.
Right.
But I've even reframed that. I just tell myself, this is the way my body prepares for peak performance.
You're the man. That's cool.
So,
just preparing.
Yeah, just preparing for peak
awesome.
performance.
I'm gonna use
That's
that.
all. This is good. You know, it's like a God-given thing that really serves me.
That's cool.
One of my coaches right now is Dan Sullivan. And one of the things Dan talks about is entrepreneurs takes a lot of courage to be successful. But then once they get successful, they spend all their time thinking about how they can create a company that doesn't require any risk. And once that happens, that's the death of the company.
Yeah.
So you've got to continue to push yourself and put yourself in situations that are not, you know, irresponsibly risky. But that's the essence of being an entrepreneur. It's never certain. You're moving in the realm of uncertainty, and that's good. That's where you ought to be if you're going to be an entrepreneur.
That's great. That's great advice. Well, when we come back, we are going to learn his favorite things. We're going to do fast facts right after this. Michael gave so much great information, I had to cut out multiple questions and lots of extra footage, so be sure and go check that out at thepursuit.tv/Michael Hyatt. But for now, here are my key takeaways on success from my interview with Michael Hyatt. First, use what you have where you are. This was his answer to the multiple questions about building his blog as a CEO and if that was an advantage for him. And he went on to say that you have to use whatever advantage you have, and it's easy to say, oh, well, so-and-so made it because he was CEO or because they're good looking or because. You have to use what you have where you are. And I loved the specific quote he gave. He said, perform in the assignment you've been given. I love that. Number 2, be responsive. I found this really refreshing in today's era where it can be weeks before you hear back from someone because they have so many emails and so many social media things to respond to. And he said what got him to CEO was probably how responsive he was. So be responsive in your current job or with your clients or with your followers. Number 3, commit and follow through. When I asked him, the virtual mentor, what he looks for in mentees, he said that he looks for someone who takes responsibility and then takes action. He gave the example that his mentees in his Inner Circle program use the breaks during their sessions to execute what they just talked about. So commit and follow through. Number 4, get comfortable with fear. I love how he talks about reframing fear so that you know that this is just your natural response to going outside of your comfort zone, which is essential for success. And lastly, get comfortable with discipline. Now, he didn't actually mention this as a key trait to success in his interview, but if you look at his life and when he talks about how he built his blog and even his habits, running, all things that take patience and discipline. So get comfortable with discipline on your quest to take your life and your goal and your business to the next level. We are back with the one and only Mr. Michael Hyatt, and we are going to play, not really a game, but we're going to do a segment called Fast Facts. So
I'm scared of this, by the way.
Don't be scared.
Okay.
Just as best as you can remember, as quickly as you can answer, okay? What is the wallpaper on your phone?
Whatever the default wallpaper is. I couldn't even tell you.
Everyone's going to be disappointed in that answer.
Sorry.
Okay, what is the last thing you remember Googling?
A piece that goes to my selfie stick that I broke on vacation.
Before the previous vacation, when is the last time you used your selfie stick?
It was.
You don't have to answer. I just love that you had one.
It was, I think it was maybe about 2 weeks before I went on that vacation. I've never really used it in a production environment. I just thought it would be cool.
It is cool.
But
you made it cool, the fact that you have a selfie stick. Okay, who's the last person that called or texted you?
I think my daughter Megan.
Who is the last person that you remember emailing?
My accountant.
What is your favorite blog to visit?
Well, I really like Donald Miller's blog a lot.
Now you mean Storyline, right?
Yeah, Storyline.
He has other writers. But
that's right.
Okay.
But I specifically like it when Don writes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Clarify.
So Pat Flynn is another person that I read a lot. I really enjoy his.
What is your favorite podcast to listen to?
I would say probably Dan Sullivan's 10X Talk, I think it's called.
What is one word you are too guilty of using?
Could it be a phrase?
Yeah. Your daughter's laughing off camera. I feel like
there's
she
a couple
wants to
like
answer for
okay,
you.
so like taking it to the next level.
Oh.
Okay, so I despise that, but I still say it occasionally. Or this is how we make the sausage.
You somehow managed to leave that out of this interview, but I love it.
It was intentional.
Oh, wow. What is Michael Hyatt's biggest pet peeve?
People that are unresponsive.
Oh, yeah, that goes.
So I have to nag them. You know, I
Yeah.
don't like doing that.
Nobody
I don't like
wants
being
to nag.
their mommy.
Nobody
I don't like
wants
being
to nag.
their mommy. Their mommy.
What is your favorite snack?
Almonds.
Raw almonds?
Yeah, raw almonds. Organic.
Oh my. Favorite cereal?
I don't eat much cereal, but probably oatmeal.
What is your favorite TV show?
I don't really watch TV. If I had to pick one, it'd probably be 60 Minutes.
Okay, new question. What is your favorite form of entertainment? Like just fun.
Fishing.
Favorite candy?
I don't eat candy. I occasionally eat dark chocolate.
Okay.
I don't have a sweet tooth.
If you were to just go crazy, if Michael Hyatt were to just get crazy, what would that look like for you? Like chocolate covered almonds, maybe? I say this with love, but this is just hilarious. I love that.
Well, I might wear a shirt that doesn't button down or something. I might wear a shirt that doesn't button down or something. No, just kidding.
I'm glad we did. This is awesome. People are going to love this. Well, I cannot thank you enough for letting us invade your space and ask you crazy questions today.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Thank you. And he has generously offered to give away 2 copies of Platform that he's going to sign for you. Oh, and I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite leadership book that has impacted your life?
Probably the 5 Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell.
Okay, we're going to give away a copy. The show is going to give away a copy of
Awesome.
that as well. So go to thepursuit.tv/Michael Hyatt and enter to win. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Be sure and check out michaelhyatt.com and platformuniversity.com. And join us next week. I'm Kelsey Humphreys, and this has been The Pursuit.